Welcome to the BS and Beer Show. This is a pre-recorded December 24th episode, and it is going to be who we are today. So I'm Emily Mottram, architect here in Maine, and I'm drinking coffee this morning for the show. We want to encourage local groups. BS and Beer really got started as a response to the COVID pandemic for us to get together. It's gone national, and we want to encourage other people to start their own local groups. If you're interested in starting a local group in your area, reach out to us. There might be other people that we can connect you with to get that started. We also want to thank our media partners, Green Building Advisor and Fine Home Building, for helping us make this happen all this year. And we want to let you know that we will also have a pre-recorded Pretty Good House show up on December 31st. So get your beverage and celebrate New Year's with a little bit of BS on the 31st. And after the show, as we usually do, we continue the conversation on Green Building Advisor on the blog post that Kiley will put up. And we want to encourage you guys to tell us who you are. So everybody out there who's been watching either the replays or joining us live, tell us who you are. Tell us about our audience. And we want to hear a little bit more about you. So off to you, Travis.
Hey, good morning or evening or whatever time you're watching this. Yeah, I'm Travis Broner. I'm in Kansas City. And I am also drinking coffee for our morning edition. Yeah, I'm a builder here. I got involved with BS and Beer because I saw Mike posting something on Instagram about these great topics that I wanted to go to these discussion groups, and Maine's a hell of a commute. So I found another way, started a group here, and then got roped in with all these wonderful people. Good morning. I guess I would kick it to Kiley. Good morning, Kiley.
Good morning.
Who
I
are
already
you?
drank my coffee. I've been up for hours and hours. You all know I'm super early riser. So I'm the GBA's senior editor. I took over for Brian, and that's sort of what landed me on the show. He was the editor, and I'm the editor in training is sort of how I think of it. We all think of it. So under his tutorialship, I am taking on that role. I was on the Fine Home Building podcast as the design editor because that's where I had been working. I'm sure all of you are familiar with Fine Home Building magazine. I was there for 2.5 years before taking on this role. And everybody who knows me well knows this is not an easy thing for me to do. So it's great practice. I would like to conquer my fear of public speaking. And Zoom is probably the best thing that's ever happened to me because nobody's in the room with me, and that helps a lot. So more to come. Mike?
Good morning. I'm Mike Maines. I'm a residential designer in Maine. I just finished my coffee out of my favorite Canadian Mounties mug. Which is racially diverse and gender diverse. But it's, I started out as a builder, and then I transitioned into design. I've been mostly designing for the last 15 years. I'm also a lifelong stutterer, and a funny story about how BS and Beer started. It's based on the building science discussion group that I believe is the first of its kind, started in Portland, Maine. I lived there for 10 years and attended that. I moved away and I was doing some speech therapy. Stuttering is this weird affliction, and sometimes speech therapy helps. After a year of that, I wasn't getting anywhere, and I was really missing the discussion group. So I figured if I could talk about my favorite subject in front of a small crowd, that would probably be pretty good speech therapy. So that's how BS and Beer was born. We did that for a couple of years. The pandemic hit. I asked my friend Emily to collaborate on trying out a Zoom version, which we didn't really know where it would go. And it seemed to strike a chord. We asked Travis to join us. We knew and liked Travis, and he had started his group. And so the three of us did it along with Brian. And then now we have Kiley as our co-host, and it's been just a really fun result of the COVID pandemic. Like, this wouldn't have happened without COVID. So it's really exciting that it has happened. Just as fun to get together and talk with you guys every week. And it's also fun to talk on our Friday morning recaps, which is basically what this is. So good morning, and I'll kick it back over to Emily.
Great, because I totally forgot to make the one announcement that I had. So rolling it back here for a minute, AIA New York Custom Residential Architects Network is hosting a webinar on high performance home builders on Tuesday, January 26th from 6 to 8 p.m. And Kiley will put the link for that up in the blog post. So for anybody who wants to attend that, that's our announcement going forward. If you have other announcements too, and you're telling us who you are, feel free to post in the Green Building Advisor blog about your upcoming event if you have something related to BS going on. That's there.
A great idea.
So yeah, to kick it off, I'm actually going to start with something that I thought of last night. Last night's show, the last one, you're probably not watching this today, but obviously the last show on Thursday night on our Healthy Buildings book review was really great. If you didn't get to see the discussion, go and watch the replay. But they made a couple of comments at the end. I think it was Kyle about, teaching our kids and the impact and starting really young. And June kind of brought this up. And so I'm curious, you guys, what was the biggest influence in your childhood that led you to building science or what we're doing now? Anybody who listens to my podcast knows a lot about my background. I grew up in a farming community. Farm to table was like just how I was raised. I didn't know it was a thing. And so I think my grandfather had a solar panel on his roof for as long as I could remember. So for me, it was just kind of natural. And so I would say my grandfather probably had the biggest impact on that, growing up in this farming community with a contractor grandfather who was really interested in sustainability, like way back in the day. So Travis, childhood influence?
Yeah, I was an early riser as a kid on the weekends, and your TV options, I'll date myself here, I'm 43. My TV options, not on cable, included a whopping 3 channels. So I was watching PBS every weekend in the mornings. And so I got a lot of This Old House, a lot of Yankee Workshop. I definitely have that interest going way back and how things go together. I'm a real spatial oriented guy. But now that I think back on it, I have hardworking lineage. Like my grandparents were both farmers, and they had me on the roof, shingling with the rest of the cousins when I was probably 8 or 10. So I got used to putting things together and fixing things. And my Uncle Jerry had a hardware store in the small town in north central Kansas, Washington, Kansas, for all of the 16 people that live there that are listening. The True Value hardware store in Washington, Kansas was also the Radio Shack. And my Uncle Jerry could pretty much fix anything. And he was maybe the coolest guy that I knew as a kid. And it was just fascinating to me to walk back and see his workbench and see, like, over here, he's helping his son, Jeff, restore an MG. And then on the bench, there's the old tube TVs dismantled, and he's soldering panel boards. And
That's cool.
Out here in the backyard, they're building the deck, and they've got it's just amazing to me that everything that is around us in our lives that we kind of take for granted, that it works, it doesn't work, it performs the function that we need. He was way ahead of that. It was always, everything was in working order, or at least in a state of progress toward working order again. And so I guess on that level, that's probably where I got my interest peaked at a young age. And then I built sets for the theater in high school, and then started doing side work, and the rest is history. And I'm licensed in all the trades with my partner, Joe, and we self-perform all our work because we just love to have our hands in it. It's so satisfying. And so when I heard the comment last night about education, part of it is about like literally educating, but so much of it, in my view, and I talked to Rob Yeaget about this on the Keep Craft Alive discussion, it's really about exposure, in my view, like just showing people how this stuff works and what it is. That's really what Mike did for me with building science. Like, I'm not a physics guy. I didn't take physics in high school, but you just exposed me to it. And now all of a sudden it's like, I can't get enough. So I think that's how it works for kids too. I'm a kid at heart. It works the same way with my kids. If I show them something and I explain to them, these are the 3 ways that heat moves. My 7-year-old can tell you all about conduction and convection and radiation. And I hope I don't make her into too big a dork, but God, she's smart. I don't know. That's the way I view it. How about you, Kiley?
Well, Emily, the way you describe your growing up, oh boy, I come from the polar opposite of that, but I grew up in low income housing, and it was located next to a town dump. And I spent much of my childhood escaping in books that were all about country living. And I wanted so badly. I remember a number of times as a kid telling my mom that I wanted to clean the world because it just seemed so ugly to me. I was very aware of that at a very young age. And my dad's side of the family, I was introduced to farm living. He grew up on a farm. I come from peasant stock on the Jacques side of the family. And I remember as an 8-year-old taking a trip up to Vermont and meeting my grandmother for the first time and seeing farm life and the cats and the horse barn. And it was everything that I had been dreaming of in my fantasy world of reading. And I wanted nature in my life in a way that I did not have until I was old enough to make that happen for myself. And I think all of that reading and the fantasy of it, one thing led to another, and reading and writing's kind of always been my thing. And I've also been a lifelong steward of the environment. Nature is a huge part of my life. It's very important to me. And it's a very serendipitous route that I took as a philosophy major in college. I got out of school. I had nowhere to go. So I wound up as a farm jockey for a few years on an organic farm, and I couldn't have been happier, but I also recognized that I couldn't make a living at $7 an hour forever. So I decided to pursue horticulture because it would still have me with my hands in the soil and in beautiful environments. But it was a little bit more intellectually stimulating. There's lots to be learned there, and it's science heavy. So I did that for a few years, also kind of got to a ceiling with it and went back to school for an associate's in science. And that got me into plant pathology and soil science. And, you know, it was all really fascinating stuff. It was an excellent program at the University of Washington, the University of Massachusetts, the Stockbridge School. So that put me on another path. And so I wound up being a professional gardener in many settings for 22 years. The last of which was at the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle, Washington, where I converted a traditionally managed rose garden that was, you know, roses are tricky, and typically they are managed with a lot of pesticides and fungicides. And I made one application. I said, I will never do this again. You either need to fire me or we need to make a change. And for 6 years, I wound up working on a very complex compost tea program, and I converted that 2.5-acre garden into an organically run, sustainably managed project and public garden. It was almost 200, no, excuse me, it was at least 100 years old. It was getting up there in terms of age, but it was a very important place, and that did not happen easily. And people were really upset with the results the first year round, but I was committed to it, and it got me on a path. One thing led to another. My body started to give out. And by the time I was 38, I thought I need to make a career change. And I'll never forget having a conversation because I had no idea about where I wanted to go and what to do. And somebody said, well, you've always really enjoyed writing and reading. So what about being an editor? And that just immediately, I thought, yes, that is what I want to do. So I went back to school once more, and I got I spent 9 months doing a night program, and I wound up with a certificate in writing and editing. And then I spent 2 years just building my resume by doing a lot of free stuff. I looked for every possible green outlet I could find, and I just did everything for free. And I did a little stint at Starbucks at age 40 because I had to just swallow it and do what I had to do, and got an editorial internship. One thing led to another. I wound up at a regional magazine. I met the editor of what was just starting out as USGBC's first their membership publication. It's now been published for 7 years. And that was the biggest break I could have gotten. That set me on a path as an environmental journalist, is what I consider myself to be. I am writing on behalf of people who are passionate about building science and the built environment, which is sort of funny, like, why don't I work for the Nature Conservancy or something? But the built environment is what affects the natural environment. And it's building science is a set of tools to protect our natural environment. And that is my passion. I'm a green advocate, and that's why I'm here. Mike?
I think our listeners just learned a ton
I can't
about
follow
Kiley. Like,
That was
I was,
amazing.
thank you for sharing that with us. Not
I know,
to
you
cut
probably
you
all
off,
been
Mike.
like,
Oh yeah,
who
no, I
is
can't.
this girl?
Yeah, no, I've known Kylie for like 2 years now. I knew she spent time as a gardener. Then recently I learned it was 22 years because I thought she was about 32. So I was trying to work out the math there. And yeah, no, thank you. That was great. No, but I think my background is probably more like Emily and Travis's. I grew up in rural Maine, actually about 10 miles from where I live now, although I lived away for a long time. Most of my ancestors were farmers, construction workers. I have a lot of teachers in my family, a couple of business people. So I also come from peasant stock for the most part, and grew up very close to nature. Exploring fields and woods and a river. I spent and also learned a really good work ethic. By age 5, I was mowing lawns for $1 an hour. By age 10, I could cut down and buck up trees. Did a lot of that. I learned to work hard at a young age. Sometimes wish I learned to play more, but I, I learned how to work. And I guess I was in high school and we started watching This Old House. So I really have to thank This Old House for sort of getting me interested in construction. And then specifically Ted Benson built a timber frame for one of the shows, and I grew up in an old house. We had a timber frame barn, and I could see I loved the history and the craftsmanship and the connection to nature of you're seeing these large dimension timbers that are only one step removed from a tree, and they allowed for big expanses and a lot of indoor outdoor connection. It just really opened my eyes to building. So I decided then that I wanted to design and build timber frames and energy efficient houses. I actually went to meet with Ted Benson's engineer, Ben Brungraber, who's a well-known timber framer, to basically say, I want to work with you guys. What should I, and I have to go to college. What should I study? Because my dad was an engineer, and engineers are all anti-architecture. If he was an architect, anyway, short story. I studied architectural engineering, graduated, and needed to make a living, and I'd really gotten into the craftsmanship. So actually, after graduating with a degree in engineering and a lot of debt, I decided I was going to make furniture. So I did that for about 6 months before I realized that maybe the only job that pays less than farming is furniture making. I made about $2 an hour. So I moved to Boston and set up as a carpenter. And so I worked as a carpenter in Boston for several years, wound up on Nantucket for a few years, building and renovating out there. Came back to Boston, worked more, did a stint as a cabinet maker, all self-employed. So I learned to work with clients and how business systems work. But I really got tired of city life, or big city life. People from really big cities would chuckle that I consider Boston a big city, but for me that's a city. So my wife and I moved to Portland, which is about halfway between Boston and where we both grew up. And I tried to find a job as a carpenter. I really connected with a contractor who was starting a design department. He asked me if I wanted to start his design department. I had no experience designing or interning. I didn't have an architectural education, but I knew how to draw and I knew how to build houses. So I said, sure. And I just worked my way up there, and we designed and renovated nice houses along the Maine coast. And along the way, I was learning more and more about the impact of the built environment. So like Kiley, just learning what was happening with our environment and then our impact of our homes on the environment. And I wanted to do more of that. So just I got more and more into it, and what I think what I see it as is, and that involves a lot of different things, but it's very closely related to craftsmanship. I think I'm drawn to high performance homes because it's the ultimate craft of building a good house. Like, you can build a pretty house.
Mhm.
To build a house that looks good and performs well, to me, that's the ultimate in craftsmanship. And so I think that's how I think of myself still as a craftsman who can draw. And yeah, I guess I don't know. I could go on, but I think that's probably.
Well, I think it leads to the next question, which was that's all of our backgrounds, kind of how we got to where we are today. And then one of the other questions that comes up a lot is, where are we going? So like, where do you see yourself in the next 10 years? Like, what are you trying to accomplish with, with this career, right? So for me, starting the podcast, doing BS and Beer, has all been about trying to make building science more mainstream, both from the architectural perspective. What do architects who have been trained not know about building science? Which if you haven't taken Christine's course, do that. If you're an architect, plug for Christine with Building Science Fight Club there. But what do we not know about how our buildings go together now, right? Because we're not building the same way we used to be. Also highlighting, other women in the industry to just encourage people, right? This whole idea of, keeping craft alive, and that the built environment and construction is, during COVID, been an essential service, and also should be something that we celebrate and are really excited about. It should be this career that you choose to go into because you're really excited about it, and it has so many facets. So, celebrating that and doing that. And then, we did the Healthy Buildings book. That one was written a lot about office buildings, which we kind of already know is maybe, it's definitely not going to come back to what it was before. But, my big thing in the residential world is developments. There are so many developments being built right now, not taking into account healthy buildings, on a mass scale. So I'm really interested in working with developers on starting to think about our buildings differently, and that people are asking for this because the health impacts of our homes can really impact social, mental, physical health. And, when we talk economics, people just want to know what it costs on day one. But, I don't want to get into a huge discussion on the cost of health insurance in our country, right? But like, preventative health and doing those things is like, that is just money put into a different pot. So if we can make our buildings healthier, maybe we can pay less in health insurance. Maybe we can have healthier, environments. And it's a big, huge, lofty goal. And I'm not going to accomplish it in 10 years. But if I can just get people talking about it, I think that's, and if you listen to me or a podcast on BS and Beer, we all know I like to talk. So on that note, Travis, next 10 years.
Next 10 years. Well, I think you touched on a couple of really important things in there that I don't want to lose track of. So rather than just talk about me, I'll talk about us for a second and just say that I think that we do a lot on this show talking about lofty goals. A case study on a house out in the woods. I get a little heat in comments or emails like, that's great, but that's not really making a big difference. You do it on one house, you're not really doing what we need to be environmentally more responsible. And I do agree that we're not going to save the world by building one-offs in the woods, but what we do make a big difference at when we talk about these things. And I thought Kiley did an excellent job in the Healthy Building show that we recorded last night, talking about the importance of LEED for this very reason. You have to start somewhere, and you have to inspire before there will be movement. You do nothing by not trying and not innovating and not pushing to that next, really pushing the envelope of what can we do? What's the next way to make it better? How can we eliminate waste? How can we be more aware of what we're putting in the landfill? Like, every single element of the built environment came from somewhere and is going somewhere. And if you track it all the way, you can see that these one-offs in the woods that everybody, you can't do that, it doesn't apply, minimum code would make the biggest difference. Yeah, it would. If we can get people to bring up the bottom, like John Dean said on one of our other shows, we would make a much greater difference in our environment and the future of our children and our children's children. There's no question. But ignoring those brilliant projects that have solved some of these problems and have found a way to build responsibly and efficiently for reasonable costs, or, you know, innovating super expensive products that will come down in price the more people adopt them, that is moving the ball forward. We are making progress in incremental ways, and it's super important to me that we keep reminding people that that's why we have these conversations, and that's why these topics are important. And so I think for me, for my 10-year plan, I'm very much in love with having my hands on the work. Even though my partner and I run a successful business, and we're very grateful for that, I have very little interest in getting better at business. I have a tremendous amount of enthusiasm about getting better at delivering durable buildings that are sustainably sourced and are comfortable for the occupants, because that's really what durability is. If you make something crappy, then it goes away. If you build something that gets water in the wall, then that rots and it goes away. If it's ugly, it's going to go away because nobody wants it. It's going to get replaced with something better. So that's what drives me. That's really how I got into this, mostly as a remodeler. I don't like fixing stuff. I don't want to go back and do my work over. I want to do it right, really well, like so that people come and see it. I would love to show my kids all this stuff, you know, on my deathbed. I hope they're talking about that thing that I built, you know, like that's the move. So for the next 10 years, I'm pushing toward delivering the best possible product I can to anyone who will ask me for it, anyone who's willing to get involved. I think that's where I'm headed in business. But on a personal level, I mean, that's how I got involved with Keep Craft Alive. I think it's so important to just expose young people to the joy of this and to show them the difference that they can make. Even if it's a little increment, that's still a difference. And all those increments add up. So that's my 10-year plan. I'm hoping to teach a little bit, maybe present a little bit at local contractor licensing. You know, this local BS and beer thing that we've got going with our annual event, the Building Science Symposium, that's making a difference. All these little things make a difference. And I think it's so exciting to be part of that, that anyone that you expose that to wants to be in. They want to help too. Everybody lives here. You know, the environment's a big place that everyone's in, right? There's my 10-year plan. What do you got? Mike, Kylie, who wants it?
Or, well, I'm sorry, I'm stuttering again. Before I answer my version, just I wanted to pick up on the local group thing again, just because that is important to me, and just it's also been not by plan, but when people ask about starting a group or hesitate, I say, look, I'm a person who stutters. I'll stop harping that. It's just it makes it uncomfortable to speak in public. I'm a strong introvert, and now I live in a very rural place. We have about 30 people per square mile, which is pretty rural. And from our first meeting, I had good interests. So I tell people, if I can start a group, you can, and I mean it. Because pretty much, I think we could have groups every 60 miles apart, all across the country. And in fact, we also have a group about an hour away from Melbourne, Australia, as well. So just it's become a global movement, and it's just super fun to know that we are moving the needle a little bit. There are all these great programs. There's a lot of government sponsored programs, a lot of businesses, you know, anything from Energy Star to LEED to Passive House Living Building Challenge, all these different things matter. And the things we're doing, you know, BS and Beer and the Pretty Good House movement are small things, but they matter a little bit. And there's a huge ripple effect that everything we do matters. I believe that. So it's whenever you have a decision to make, you can make a decision that helps or hurts. And so I always try to make the decision that will help and hope that spreads. My own 10-year plan is, although I've been, you know, moved up from making $1 an hour at age 5 to $2 an hour after college. Now I make a little bit more. I've run a business for, you know, over 15 years and managed other ones. I'm still definitely learning the craft of business. That's a challenge for me, and I'm a personality. I feel like I've missed a lot of opportunities in the past. I feel like I'm in the right place at the right time. Being in Maine, especially during COVID, and just as we move to a digital society, people are moving to Maine. People who live in Maine are renovating through all these avenues. People are learning more and more about what it means to live in a healthy building, or that's actually poor grammar. So living in a building that promotes health and well-being, and that lives lightly on the environment. Just people are moving to Maine. I'm in a place where I can design for Maine, and actually I'm really overloaded with work at the moment. So although I like the craft of designing, I'm finding that I feel a responsibility to turn it into more of a business and get help, so I can design more and do more of this stuff. So over the next 10 years, my goal is to build up not just build up my design work. I'm not the most talented designer. I feel like I'm a generalist. There are other people who are better at everything. So it's a matter of putting together networks of people who are very talented at what they do and teaching what I know and building a business so we can really make sure the buildings we're building are doing better. And yeah, I think on a more personal note, although all I do is talk about and design high performance houses, my own house is an 1830 farmhouse in nearly original condition. Sound good, but it actually is not so energy efficient. So I am working on improvements. My next project is a bathroom renovation, and there are other projects. Hopefully in 10 years, I'll have a completed house. Any carpenters in the group will laugh at me. It's a hope. It's not a, I know how it goes.
We're done.
Yeah. How about you,
At
Kiley?
least-
Yeah, well, listening to the three of you talk, it reminds me once again why I love what I do, which is I have a platform and an opportunity to feature the work that you do. And that's what jazzes me. I've learned so much from, I just can't say enough about Fine Home Building, the staff there. What a wonderful group of people, so talented, so smart, so driven and passionate, and it's a family, and I'm so blessed to be part of it. And now I feel like I have a new family at GBA and here with you all. So I'd like to see GBA first honor what Martin started, Martin Holliday, the father of GBA. I have the utmost respect for him and his knowledge base. So I feel a tremendous responsibility to keep those voices coming. I love hearing from people like Travis and Ben Bogie and just the sort of like the current generation of builders. I'm looking for the next generation of voices. So I'd like to grow GBA to include younger people. We've just hired Steve Basic's daughter, Alexandra, to start doing a blog post about energy smart details. So she's an architect too, fresh out of school. So I'm just so thrilled to have her on board, and she's thrilled too. So this is an opportunity for her to grow her skill set and to have it recognized by people. So I just, I hope to be I hope GBA is here in 10 years, and I hope to be at the helm of it in a real way, professionally, yet personally. I don't have the background in building science that allows me to speak fluently about it, and my goal is to get there. And I think it might take me 10 years just to get through all of the content on the site. So I've got my work cut out for me. This show it pushes me out of I live my entire life, my entire professional life is lived outside of my comfort zone, and that is a good thing for me. I'm like Mike, I'm very deeply introverted, and it is not an easy forum for me. So I am grateful that I'm being pushed. Let's see, in terms of, I have a fantasy of, I live in Connecticut now. I moved here for this position at Fine Home Building, the position I had there. And I need to get to the hills. So I have a long-term plan to get up north. I've lived there before. I love it. It is where I belong. And I've picked Mike's brain a little bit about the idea of having a house built for me. I know a very talented carpenter who lives in New Hampshire, and he's all ready. I just need a set of plans. But as I've learned recently, buying land is no small feat. It is very complicated. So that's my 10-year plan. And I think in doing that, working with the right people, I'd love to work with a designer. And see that whole thing unfold. It would be an incredible learning experience that would feed into my professional goals as well. So that's what I have going.
That's awesome. Okay, so this is going to be I have two more questions, but this one is a little bit of a personal thing that if you've listened to a little bit of the BS and Beer Show, if you listen to the podcast, Travis and I have this crazy idea about highlighting heroes in the built environment. And since I get to be the host today, I get to go first, and I'm going to go with a current hero of the building science built environment. And I'm going to call you out here, Christoph, that I think what Christoph Irwin is doing with Positive Energy, with their podcast, and just his personal beliefs on what we're doing is a great way for us to, follow along with somebody we can get behind every time he comes on BS and Beer or he comes on the show. I feel inspired to do better, get better, learn more. I think all of us here, and part of the reason why we do the BS and Beer Show is because we're probably all going to be lifetime learners, Kiley. We're always want to read the next book. What's the next thing? So it might take you 10 years to get through the current content on GBA, but it's going to be 10 more years of just new content as we grow and improve. And I think as far as a current hero in the built environment, I'd like to throw a shout out to Christoph because he definitely makes me want to be a better architect. Travis?
Can I jump in here?
Kiley, go for it.
I have to say it right here, right now. Mike Maines is my hero.
Oh, come on.
That's true. It's such a pleasure to work with you, Mike, on 100 different levels. And you, Mike and I started working together as editor, writer. He's a fantastic writer. Your skill set is so broad. And I just can't say enough about what influence you've had on me, and you don't even know it. And that comes, you feel like you're harping on your stutter. Well, I really, there's kind of a stutterer in me. I'm not a stutterer, but I really appreciate what that might involve. Anyway, point being that, you're pretty good. Everything you do comes from a place of such deep thought and such commitment, and you're such a talented designer. And it is just a blessing to be working with you. You probably don't realize how much you influence me, but I needed to say that.
No, thank you. That's very nice. I don't know how to.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I didn't mean to put
but
no. as soon as Emily said something about finding, naming her hero, I was like, well, that's the no-brainer.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That's flattering. Thank you. No, I have to second Emily's comment on Christoph. Just I don't know anybody. I've studied personality types a lot, just trying to understand who I am and trying to understand clients. I'm not a natural people person, so that's a way that people like me can understand people is by reading research of people who study personalities. And there are engineer personalities. I'm an engineer personality. We're usually not good we're good at the technical stuff. We may not be so good at the people stuff. And just Christoph has this ability, like he's a super smart engineer, but then he has this ability to communicate and share his passion and his concerns and values. It's just, I find I can't listen to him and not want to do not just a little better, but a lot better. Just anyway, there's that. I'd say a hero of mine that I don't think we talk about as much here as we should is Dr. Joe Stiebrick at Building Science Corp. One of my first real introductions to building science was going to the University of Southern Maine, I don't know, close to 20 years ago, where this guy with a funny last name was giving a talk, and so I went. It was a small room, maybe 30 people. I think the topic was cellulose insulation, or at least the cellulose company sponsored it. So just it was essentially a lunch and learn, and I got out of the office for an afternoon. A lot of fun, but there was this guy who was very entertaining. He swore, he told jokes, he made building science just seem so fun. There was this whole world. I thought I knew a lot. I'm one of those people who knew a lot more at 21 than I do at 47. Just I realize as I go on just how much of a student I am, and I'll always be a student. But just this whole world opened up of, wow, there's so much to know about construction that I don't even know, and it's so exciting, and it's just anyway. So just he's practically invented the field of building science. Just huge influence. I mean, he trained Steve Bazek, an architect who has a huge influence. His Stiebrick's daughter is Christine Williamson, Building Science Fight Club. Now she's having a huge influence. I have to point to him as for me, he's the person who I've learned more from probably than anybody. Yeah. So how about you, Travis?
Well, this is tough because I'm not really a hero kind of guy. Like I don't aspire to be like any one person. I guess my dad's my hero, but that's super hokey and no one tuned in to hear that. But he takes responsibility for everything. You know, he was always the guy that, I don't know, we had humble beginnings, and he was always the guy that bought lunch for everyone when we had people together. And I don't know. So my dad is the best guy ever. But heroes of building science is or of built environment is what we were really talking about here. And for me, I'd have to go probably with Martin Holliday. Martin's approach to building science, building in general, the idea of green building is so much what I see as practical and useful and really foundational to the way things kind of need to progress for them to actually progress, that I really get hung up on every little thing about, I mean, his book, which was really just a culmination of the musings of the Energy Nerd blog that he wrote for so many years.
Still writing.
Yes, of course. But that book it's just exactly what you need, you know, like it addresses the topic and then immediately breaks down why the approach is this and removes the, I don't know, kind of the phoniness of it. Like there's no greenwashing or ad gloss. It's very, very practical. And I think it just appeals to the Midwestern sensibility and the self-performer. Like our company does everything in-house because we want to control all the aspects. And Martin's approach considers that. Nothing is considered without considering the cost and the environmental impact and the durability. Like every single thing is considered. And I think that's a little bit unique because our time is about specialty, right? Like everyone focuses in an area, but Martin's broad enough, and Mike, you are too. I mean, we've talked about so many excellent heroes. They're all going to make great trading cards on the heroes of the built environment. Martin's probably my guy for that.
Yeah. A quick note about that as well is another inspiration for me to start BSMBR as a local group was specifically includes Martin. Maybe 8 years ago or so, my wife had a business meeting in southwestern Connecticut, so I tagged along so I could have do a quick check in with my friends at Taunton Press, and we ended up going to a local pub for a beer. So just around this was we went out and had beers with Rob Yagid and Justin Fink, and I don't remember, but Rob Watzek might have been there. I think we invited Andy Engel, but he wasn't available. And Martin was there, and we sat around a round table in the corner of a pub and talked about building science for a couple of hours. And just like if you don't know Rob Yagid, he was head editor at Fine Home Building for years, and he started the Keep Craft Alive movement. Justin was the editor and then head editor for years and years and years, and he's had a huge influence on the magazine. So just there are these like big people in the industry just sitting around chatting about building science and trading stories. It was so much fun for me because I still don't know anywhere near as much as I want. I knew way less 8 years ago, so I could just sit there and absorb all this experience. And so I wanted to replicate that for others. And so that's when I describe BSMBR. I often describe it as a table, and it's often that specific table I'm thinking of when when I say that.
I love that. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So to end the show today, we don't want to keep you guys for too long. Obviously, it's Christmas Eve if you're watching this when it gets posted, or whenever you're watching the replay. and speaking of replays, you guys have watched 406,000 minutes of the show on replay. Not on top of those of you who have tuned in with us some or every week since the beginning. So big thank you there. And so to let it go for the end of 2020, I'm going to ask everybody what your favorite BS and beer show was. Mine was Kitchen Ventilation because I say this a lot. I might be an okay architect. I'm a terrible housewife. I don't do much cooking. And then I watched the Kitchen Ventilation show and I thought, I'm never going to cook again. I'm literally going to throw out all of my cookware.
Yeah.
I think I typed to Travis in a text during that show, did he just say I have to use my range vent hood with my toaster? ?
Yeah.
I think there were a lot of people now. Takeout is pretty popular in COVID-19 because we can't go anywhere. But I think there were a lot of people after that show who were like takeout and grilling only.
Right.
So if you haven't watched the Kitchen Ventilation show, it's disturbing. I highly recommend it. Go for it. Learn a little bit about kitchen ventilation. So that's my pick for 2020. Travis?
I'm a simple man and I like simple shows. We've had a lot of shows that I've learned a lot from, and many that I've learned more than my favorite show. But I definitely picked up some things with Jake Rubin and Ben Bogey on talking WRBs, even though it's a simple thing that we kind of take for granted. Is, you know, this is really obvious stuff we've been doing for hundreds of years. Lap the damn product and the water goes away. It's just, that show for me it's the essence of what makes this so easy. Because those two guys especially are, like all of you, they're just so generous. They're so generous with their vast knowledge and their experience on job sites, and you can reach out to them and they will help you. That's what they brought to the show. It's that same level. It's the conversational aspects where, you know, you got some good job site ribbing. They're giving each other a little hell, but we're also talking about important stuff, and everyone's learning and getting better. So that was the most fun for me. I've certainly been challenged a lot more in other shows, but that one was my favorite because it was so fun. Kiley?
I think my favorite show is the Halloween show, Scary Building Failures. And the primary reason it was my favorite show is because Emily's costume made me laugh for about 3 days. And there's not a lot of laughter in my life these days. So that was such a super silly show. And those guys were so clever. It was Mike Anschel and Carl Seville, the Green Police. And I just thought they had put together such a fun presentation. And again, really great information, but on a silly night. And we all need that now and then. And you're right, Travis, most of the shows are just, and that included, but packed with information and lots to learn. And I'm constantly taking notes. And that night I was just able to kick back because Emily made it so fun. And, you know, that was my favorite.
I love Halloween. That was easy for me.
That you made me love Halloween this year.
It's really hard for me to choose a favorite. I enjoy all of them, and it's really fun. We sort of have our ideal formula we talk about, and which is often more conversation heavy, but we so often deviate, and they're always interesting. It's just so fun to see where they go. Like I really like that it's unscripted, that we're unscripted and we sort of just roll with it. It's a very conversational format. Anyway, I like them all. One that stands out for me, again, I started out talking about the influence Ted Benson had on me. We had Ted on for building with remodeling in mind. He had a long but in-depth and very well done presentation, and I think it was more than building with remodeling in mind. It was really, you know, going back to reading some of his books starting at like age 16. It was the culmination of his entire life's work, and I think he seemed pleased to be asked to present on his life's work, and so for him to come share everything, he should be on the list of building science
heroes. I was just going to say the same thing.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, but just that show was really special for me personally. Yeah. And I think he shares a lot of really, I know we had some criticism for like basically some of his ideas are not practical today perhaps, but I think the ideas working on and has been working on his entire career are exactly the things that we are all working on and need to continue working on.
Yeah.
Well said. So I think that is all for us today. Big thank you to the people who make the BS and Beer Show happen. The three of you, Green Building Advisor, Fine Home Building, and it wouldn't happen if people didn't tune in every week and join us. So, and if you're watching
Thank you to
this,
the audience.
Yes, and tell us your stories. Don't forget about that. That would be such
absolutely. And if you don't tune in live, you should at some point, because the chat box is a totally different show that doesn't get picked up in the recordings here. So if you want, even we usually have experts in the chat who are sharing links and information, which is awesome. But there is also some witty banter that happens pretty much every show. So join in and, you know, just get a feel for everybody just being really generous with their time. So thank you.
And be part of the community, right? Part
Absolutely.
of the community.
Thanks to all of you.